Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar with Front and Aircall. We will be starting here in just 1 minute or so. My name is Matthew. I am joined by Kai. We will do some official introductions here in just a few minutes, but go ahead, get settled. We know that we have a few of you who are still logging in and making sure that everyone can get set up. While we are waiting for everyone, Kai and I would love to learn a little bit more about who we have with us today. So we would actually love to learn where you're tuning in from. And you can see this question here on your screens. What is your resolution, your top resolution for 2020? And feel free to just navigate to that chat section inside this webinar platform and let us know directly there. So again, those of you who are just joining us, let us know where you're tuning in from and your resolution for 2020. And great, I already see a few folks typing, so that is awesome. George, welcome, not big on resolutions, connecting from Connecticut. Hamburg, Germany, welcome, welcome. See a few more folks typing. For those of you who are just tuning in, we're going to get started here in just 1 minute. So if you need to take a bio break, get that next cup of coffee, go ahead and do it, and we'll get started here very shortly. Connecting from the UK. Hello from California. So Matthew, I actually used to live in San Francisco for a number of years. I now live in both Kai and I are in Europe, around the Paris area. So it's a bit colder here than I think maybe the weather you might be experiencing. Hello from Canada, Denver. Welcome, welcome. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started here. Before we do that, most of you have probably already navigated to the chat and can see it here inside this webinar platform. You will also see another section called questions. If at any point you do have a question for Kai or myself, feel free to just type it there in that question section, as we'll make sure to review them as they come in. Our webinar today is going to be talking about how Aircall, the company Aircall, drives retention by making every customer feel like they're their only one. You won't be hearing from me mostly. You will see another guest here, Kai, who is the head of customer success over at Aircall, but I'll have him introduce himself in just a second. What we'll be going over, first, just some quick intros. That way, everyone who's attending can get to know both Kai and myself a little bit more. We'll do a deep dive into Kai's story, so really learning how Aircall is managing all of their customers. And then we will make sure to end about the last 10 minutes or so for any Q&A. Just to repeat myself from a little bit earlier, if you do have a question, just go ahead and ask it in that question section that you'll see inside this webinar platform. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. So my name is Matthew. I will be your moderator for today's webinar. I help direct our global customer success programs at Front. For those of you who have not heard about Front, we are a customer communication hub for all businesses, centralizing all of a team's tools, communication, both internal and external, as well as all of their organizations and department inside one centralized hub. That way, everyone at a business can have an impact on one's customer experience. But enough about me. I will turn it over to the guest for the hour or the 30 minutes that we have. And Kai, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Matt. First of all, glad to be here. So I run the customer success team for the EMEA region at Aircall. Anyone that has not heard about Aircall, it's basically a business phone that lives in the cloud. So any business that has some needs to connect with customers on phone can basically use us. Because it lives in the cloud, we can actually do a lot of exciting stuff like integration into CRM systems, help desk, and so on. Yeah, been at Aircall for 2 years and a happy Front customer. And today here to kind of share the experience and the learnings we made along the way.
Wonderful. Well, Kai, thank you again so much. So excited to chat with you today and to have our audience pick your brain as well.
Sure.
So would love to kind of dive into our discussion here. First, with really starting kind of with a general question here, but what does success look like at Aircall? If you can maybe walk us through your team, how it's structured, how we think about those customer success goals, that might help level set all of our audience to just know what we're talking about here.
Yeah, sure. So the success team at Aircall for the EMEA region right now is around about 30 people, growing really fast, so going strong on 40 by the end of this year. Essentially, the team is cut into two halves. One group looking after our the big customers that we have, the big contracts, and then about half of the CSMs that we have in place dealing with larger volumes, so smaller contracts but larger volumes, servicing all EMEA regions in their native languages, and so in terms of setup. Working with, I guess the usual, working with a Salesforce as a CRM system, and net retention goals are kind of our primary focus. So in terms of what does success actually mean at Aircall for the success team itself, we're really strongly kind of focused on growing our customer base, just given the nature of our product. When a business that we work with grows, normally they need more phones. So net retention and especially expansion into existing contracts is really for us the primary focus.
Oh, awesome. Are there any other metrics or KPIs that you're tracking other than the net retention? I'm sure we have a few folks who are customer success oriented here with us. Would love to share some of those insights with them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a whole range of metrics, of course, that we look at in order to define what a good customer success manager should do or shouldn't do. Net retention definitely is the overarching goal. Of course, there's also gross retention that we look at in order to determine how much revenue we're actually leaving on the street while expanding quite fast. Then there's also, of course, response times, for example, that we're really interested in, not as kind of as a primary focus. NPS is something that we're really interested in as well to work on with our customers. So how can we drive that up, not only as a customer success team, but also as a company?
Oh, well, thank you for sharing. So specifically thinking about driving that retention, I know that something across the board for customer success individuals, this is something we are all interested in. Can you maybe walk us through what were some of the initial challenges, thinking about 2 years ago when you joined Aircall, how did you see the team? What were the problems that you wanted to hone in on to help solve for Aircall's business?
Yeah, so normally when I start working with the team, I just like to kind of find my footing by, first of all, of course, interviewing CSMs around their major pain points, but then also surveying the team and just understanding where they're spending their time. And so when I did that around 2 years ago at Aircall, one of the numbers that really initially struck me when we looked at the results of that survey was that people were just saying they're spending the majority of their time on email, which I guess is not super surprising because everyone that works in customer success knows that a lot of customer interactions just still happen over email. So contracts are being shared, proposals are discussed, training resources are being shared, meetings are lined up. So that in itself is probably not so surprising, but just seeing that number on paper and seeing some people estimate that they were spending around 60% plus of their time on email, just seeing that black on white just made me think a little bit more about that. And because any kind of efficiency gain that you make on that channel, then basically, incrementally builds up to something really big in terms of time gains. And then also, I guess one challenge we had back then was that our business is basically serving a lot of really different types of customers. So from really big call centers to family businesses that just need a phone system to connect with customers. So what that effectively means is we have a lot of also small business in our book. And back then we were servicing them kind of in the same way on email in particular that we were deploying with our largest customer, just kind of a light version of that. And that's not really an adequate experience. Where I found there was a lot of things that we could optimize about that. The problem was that the moment you want to connect with customers on emails, on the traditional email channels, that's kind of designed for one-to-one interactions. It's not really giving itself so much to a great experience where like you want fast response times, and where you maybe want a customer to connect with different people on your CSM team, or like maybe the next available person. So that was one of the challenges we had there. So immediately we thought, okay, we need to somehow find a solution for a shared inbox where customers can write in and then maybe different people can pick it up. But how do we do this in a kind of in an orderly way where we still have accountability for different customers? And then another question that immediately opened up when I looked at those survey results was, it's kind of strange in a way that we don't have a lot of visibility on emails performance. So like how many emails are actually being sent out? Like, are most of the emails we receive inbound responses to inbound emails, or is that lots of activity going outbound? What's the content of these emails? Up to when should we actually be sending emails? What's the opening rates on our emails? Like, there's a lot of metrics there that, when you think about it, if your CSM team is spending a lot of time on email as a main business channel, and you can't answer these questions, I certainly couldn't answer these questions back then. Like, that's quite important. That's a major business channel that you have to like monitor and actually get answers for. And I didn't feel like we were in a good position to do this. So also like analytics was one of the challenges that I thought we had to somehow tackle.
Yeah, really diving into that measurement. And I'm just actually going to take a moment here to encourage the audience, if at any point anything is resonating with you that Kai is saying, you've experienced these same problems, feel free, let us know in the chat. You'll also see a react button as well, so you can react, really make sure that Kai is resonating with something that you might be experiencing for your team. I see a few thumbs up are already coming in. So know that many teams have this problem as well. So now that we've kind of defined the problem that existed at Aircall when you got there, let's go ahead and move to how you found a solution. Would love to hear about this journey. If you could walk us through how it is you went about searching for this tool. And also, I know some of the other folks here in this webinar, they might also be software purchasers for their organization. So if you can also high level talk to us about just how you as a leader in customer success purchase software, that would be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. Like the two main avenues we had for solving that problem were basically going with let's say like a traditional help desk or service desk, or finding something else. Like the reason why we initially thought about a help desk or service desk is because solutions that are built with support use cases at the DNA like are really good at dealing with high volumes of incoming messages. So like initially I thought, okay, like why not make use of those? The reason why I put here like without using a ticketing system is that eventually like I came to the conclusion that that was not the way that I wanted to go, for fear of these solutions are great solutions, amazing software solutions out there. The fact is, however, that sometimes like you just need something that's really tailor-made for the success use case. And my fear was that in giving my CSMs a system that was basically designed with a lot of features that we didn't necessarily need, we would basically roll out something that was not as efficient as possible, and that maybe even would tempt us into adopting certain processes that are not actually success territory, but more kind of in the support spectrum. So then we were like, okay, like what do? We need a solution that actually like feels like email, like feels almost like as if you were using any kind of like your habitual email tools like Outlook, like Gmail, but with that power underneath the hood to actually like service a lot of volumes and incoming requests and drive efficiency on the outbound side. Because I think that's also really important, that the look and feel, also for the client experience. I think like one thing that I didn't want was something that feels like a service desk where you basically a number in the system, you take your number, and then like when it's your turn, like you get serviced. Because like that's not what success is about. Success is about proactivity. It's about consultation. It's about like sharing advice and actually building a partnership. Like even in that SMB segment, that's super important. So my fear as well was like if a customer sees something that looks like a ticket, they're going to treat us as if like we were service agents and kind of like just come to us with problems, as opposed to actually having meaningful discussions. Which that's why I insisted on it needs to feel like email. Complexity and scalability I should have included here is kind of like to counterbalance the efficiency and the nimbleness of the solution, you also need to pick something when you choose it with growth and scale in mind. So like we know at Aircall, like we are doubling, tripling our revenue at the moment. So you need to design something that can kind of withstand that pressure. So something that works now, that seems like a good solution now, might not be the right solution when you suddenly have 2 times, 3 times, 4 times the revenue to manage, and maybe 2 times the teams or 3 times the team number in your team. So while it needs to be simple, like it kind of like needs to be deceptively simple, it has to have kind of the ability to accommodate complexity, evolving workflows, and not be something that's kind of set in stone and then you're kind of stuck with it. So that was something as well that I worried about, like how can we guarantee that this is actually built to last? Deployment, there's never enough time in customer success, especially in a hypergrowth organization. There's always things that need to be fixed now or yesterday. So I didn't want to spend a year deploying a solution or like many months kind of like coding certain things, customizing certain things. It kind of had to function out of the box and make an immediate impact. I didn't want to spend a lot of time building the solution or customizing the solution with a lot of investment in that. And then also integration. Integration is a big one for me because effective, I think this is something I really believe in, like the best of breed approach, where you just pick something that's really focused on a particular channel and then integrate with other solutions that you already work. Everyone that runs a customer success team knows there's a ton of tools that customer success managers actually need to use in order to get the job done, from CRM systems, maybe some access to a help desk, business intelligence solutions, all of the internal tools that you use. So it just felt like if I give the team something to work on emails with in order to drive efficiency, it actually has to integrate into almost all of these different tools and surface the information to them right where they are in the email without having to kind of shift context all the time, copy paste some information, go back to the email and paste it. So that for me was like the one way in which we could immediately make a huge difference in efficiency on email. And so going back to that number of 60+% of time spent in email, I thought like if we get a solution that integrates really well, that's where the time gains are going to come from.
Mm-hmm. Well, and thankfully, it seems like you found Front, which is, I think, kind of a segue to the tool that you found. Before we really dive into why Front, in order to kind of check all of those boxes of what you were looking for, maybe if you could actually explain to our audience what the Front setup looks like at Aircall. So, how many people are using it? Kind of walk us through how you're managing some of your client communication inside Front, just very high level, but we'll really be able to drill down here in the next couple of minutes.
Yeah, so initially, like we've just rolled out for like a small testing group. Everyone loved it, so that now we've got the whole team, both the team that's dealing with the smaller contract sizes as well as kind of like the enterprise focused team on Front. So the entire team is on there. We're slowly rolling it out across regions as well. So that's currently like everyone is on it already. In terms of integrations, what we've already brought into Front is basically like our CRM system, Salesforce. We've got all of the information from customers next to the emails in there. Of course, Aircall to make quick calls to customers. I mean, it would be strange if we didn't integrate that. And then also Google Calendar just to kind of like make meeting bookings and so on as fast as possible. Like there's actually like a lot more we want to do on the integration side. But those were the 3 obvious big ones that we immediately wanted to integrate. There's a lot more coming on the tooling for the customer success side, the data side. I think that we can do a lot more either with out-of-the-box integrations, task management solutions, and so on. But yeah, so that's right now status quo. In terms of potential to scale to other teams, like right now we're fairly early in our Front journey. I think there's potential, for example, to bring adjacent teams that we work with all the time, maybe into the fold and like work with them on Front. Still to be discussed. But when we purchased Front, that was also another criteria that I thought that there would be exponential benefits from actually having other teams in the system as well. So we don't always have to go out of there or kind of like forward messages, but actually have discussions on Front with them. So that's also like another avenue that we can look at in order to drive efficiencies. Mm-hmm. Team collaboration made easier, faster. I think that's something that like was more of like a hidden benefit that I didn't really think about when we purchased Front. The fact that it actually has a lot of collaboration features where you can, work on drafts together for like a really tricky client email, or where you can get feedback from a peer that want a second pair of eyes that just checks an email, where you can leave comments on email instead of like going through like the whole forwarding or CCing game. Those were also just like hidden benefits that I didn't really think about, but that have turned out to be actually really beneficial, especially on the enterprise level side, where CSMs often will go, for example, to the manager and say, hey, like I've got this proposal, would you like to see it before I send it over? And all of that happens not kind of by forwarding or by kind of taking to other channels, but actually within the email tool.
So I would be curious, how did you even come across Front in the first place in conducting the search?
I mean, embarrassingly simple. Like I wish I could say something more impressive of doing my market research, but basically, like when we looked at alternatives to existing help desks, I just googled pooled email. I think the first time I did Front, like it was, that was maybe the only hit that I got on Google, because I really think that you were the first ones to kind of realize the potential of that. So I basically like landed on your website and then got curious.
Oh, that's great. I'll have to pass that over to our marketing team. Give them a gold star for that one. I would also be curious, how, if at all, did you kind of involve the team? You mentioned that you started with a small group, but how did you involve them in ultimately choosing Front over other solutions that you were looking at?
Yeah. So I think it's like you were asking earlier, like how do you actually buy and like choose a tool? I think the team has to be really involved in making that decision, because I think like one of the hidden benefits of rolling out a tool that's actually like really well designed is that it actually has a direct impact on how people perceive the quality of their work and also like their happiness in the workplace. I firmly believe that if you roll out a tool that feels well integrated, well thought out, that just is nice to use and actually makes you better as a CSM by giving you all the information that you need, you effectively make that team happier. Like they will think more and in better terms about their work and the work that they perform. They will be proud in it. I sometimes think it's almost the equivalent of like a nice office environment. Like if it just feels and feels good, is clean and does the job that it's supposed to do. Like in the end, it doesn't make it conceptually, it doesn't make a difference, but like from a perception point of view, like actually like if it's set up well, that's a huge benefit. So people will actually be happier, they'll be more productive. And potentially, I mean, it's very hard to quantify, down the road, like when they actually feel supported and have the information at their fingertips, they'll be more productive, but also maybe have more time to actually think through problems and so on. So putting the team in that decision process absolutely is important. The way we've done it, I don't know if it's the best way, but we had a pilot group, a small subsection of the team that tested the tool. And so like just listening to their feedback, like do they like it? Like is it an improvement over the existing setup? Do they like it compared to other alternatives? Like what just feels the best? And feels is, of course, I'm completely aware it's a very subjective measurement, but it's super important to get the kind of the CSAT from the team and let them ultimately make the decision, between like qualified alternatives, of course. And so like once we actually had rolled this out as a kind of small group, it kind of got internal PR, I would say. So people were looking over the shoulders of people using, going like, hey, that looks cool. Like, how does that work? Like, can we have that as well? So in the end, I didn't really have a hard time kind of convincing the team to adopt Front. I was a little bit apprehensive about it because email, of course, is one area where people have like their habits. They've got their folder structures, their labels, their workflows. So I actually anticipated a lot more resistance from the team saying, no, I'm happy on Gmail. Like, don't pull me over there. Like, I don't want to like rip up existing process. But that's been really, really great. And then in terms of the rollout and like actually guaranteeing that the tool is used to the maximum of its capacity, we basically have people in the team that volunteer to actually like lead that on our side. So to make sure that everyone is educated on the tool, to follow up with people that have questions about the correct setup and the more complex features in the product. So actually have members of my CSM team own that, beyond, like the more complex stuff that's more operations focused, but just like in terms of learning the platform, best practice sharing, training new joiners on it. That's actually with my CSMs.
Yeah, and I think that's a perfect segue actually to kind of the rollout, as you mentioned, of getting everyone up and trained. Would love to kind of talk through that experience that you had in that setup process.
Yeah, so I mean, the ease of setup was basically like one criteria for buying it. The idea that it functions out of the box. So that was a given, and that actually like turned out to be completely true. So we just could plug our different business channels and CRM system and so on into the tool, and it basically worked immediately. And we had emails streaming in, and you were easily able to like assign them and create the first rules ourselves. So that's been good. Another point I think that I really appreciate is our CSM Arthur, who works with us a lot, gives us a lot of good advice.
I see some hard eyes coming up, so I wonder if some other folks might work with our team.
And that's of course really important. Like on some of the harder stuff, that's having like somebody that's really knowledgeable on the professional services side. In that case, like I knew Arthur from before, so I knew like we would get somebody that was amazing in helping us roll that out. But like that's definitely like a huge plus from my front experience at least. And like the ready-made integration. If it wasn't ready-made, it would be really hard to build, for example, something that's completely customized for our purposes. But we actually saved a lot of time by having the Salesforce integration immediately set up, really customizable. All of the fields we want to see could be set up. So that saved us a ton of work building something ourselves. So yeah, like that made it pretty easy.
Wonderful. So now we've searched for our tool. We've found Front. Setup was a breeze. So would actually love to dig into the benefits that Front is providing your team, specifically as it comes to that retention of customers that we talked about in the beginning, all of those KPIs that we're tracking. Mm-hmm. So I know that you mentioned to us improved UX, you've increased your operational efficiency, and also just increase your growth from your team. Would love to actually dive into each one of these a little bit deeper. If you can walk us through how Front is providing benefit to the team, starting with improving the team's UX.
Yeah. So I think first of all, like the fact that the tool is really well liked and there's a clear accountability for each incoming email that we distribute via rules to a proper owner that is in charge of that customer experience and the answers that we need to provide. That fact has just helped us a lot, just like not letting any email slip through the cracks or get forgotten. We also like are able to basically prioritize emails based on the content. So if it's, for example, it's a very upset customer that immediately needs to be dealt with, the rules help us and will help us in the future to actually get to those conversations first. There's a lot more that we could be doing and will be doing there in segmenting our user base basically on our CM side, and then basically optimizing the adequate experience these users get based on different factors like complexity of setup, contract growth, and so on. The other thing that I again like was a hidden benefit that I, full disclosure, didn't really know about like when we bought it was the fact that when you actually have different CSMs pick up conversations with customers at different times, what you don't want is the customer to every time again have to remind us what they were talking about last time, that they already shared the contract, and so on. Like that's the type of experience you don't want a customer to have, because you want them to feel like they're talking to the entire company, and the entire company is kind of on the same page around like what they are waiting for, what they need from us. And so the fact that we actually, even if we pick up a conversation, if a different CSM picks up that conversation with the customer that a previous CSM kind of like left unclosed, they can basically see the entire history of that conversation in one email thread that's not kind of like locked into another email inbox. So that's been huge for us, because it basically eliminates this whole okay, let's remind myself like what was the problem, have they already shared the contract, and so on. It kind of like flows seamlessly from one CSM to the next if that's necessary, if there's a handover necessary, or people are just in the office at different times, or maybe just busy on a different email. That allows us to basically make the customer feel like all the information changes hands as it should. And then waiting times as well, because with a higher email volume, oftentimes it's very easy to, like, for example, forget about an email that still requires an answer. So setting up SLA warnings as well on Front basically has allowed us to eliminate completely customers waiting beyond a reasonable amount of time for the answer that's still missing. And the way that we do that is, there's a warning light, basically emails waiting for an answer for X amount of hours. Managers can get on this, assign it to somebody. So the user experience on the user side definitely is a better one. Waiting times have been reduced, and as I said, it just still feels like normal email. So users don't have to sign up to a support portal or try to reach us in other ways, or reply above the line or something like that. It's just a normal email, but then of course, like with the distribution power, finding its way to the available team member.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that has been resonating with me is really digging into the team's personal happiness, because that's actually a question that basically every team at Front is asking themselves, is how can we make work happier? So if you're a product designer, how can you design Front to make work happier? If you're in customer success, how can you work with their team to build workflows that make their team happier in what they're doing? So I know that is resonating with me for sure.
Yeah, I think honestly, that for me is such an undervalued, I guess like metric. It's not even a metric, right? But like when you buy a software, like oftentimes in buying committees, like you will just like put features side by side, and you will say, okay, like this does this, and it doesn't do the job. But really, like the people that will be using that software, like that's going to be their work environment, right? So coming back to the idea of it almost being like an office, like they spend so many hours within that tool, so that if it feels like it's well set up, like this tool actually is effectively an extension of themselves. Like it's like it helps them to like retain information about clients. So it basically makes them gives them a better memory. Like it surfaces information about the customer, so it makes them more knowledgeable, and it gives them the information when they need it. So it also makes them faster in replying, responding, and also as a unit to work more collaboratively. So it's almost like, if you give them the right tool, it's about happiness, it's about efficiency, it's about pride in work, and it's also just about feeling comfortable with the tools that are given to you. So I think that's really undervalued. Like when you just look about, oftentimes in customer success, like we talk a lot about return on investment, how much revenue does the investment in the tool actually give us in return. And I know this is important. I know it's our eyes everywhere in our field, like where we basically want to demonstrate to the customer, you make money by investing in us and expanding your footprint with us. But we must not forget, I think, that especially when it comes to productivity solutions, like the team that's working with those solutions, that's also like a factor and the quantity that you need to take into account, because you increase their happiness. You might even increase employee retention if your setup is really perfect and people feel really comfortable and empowered to do their work. They're just more happy. So eventually, like they might be less stressed and more healthy. And like there's all these like other factors that go into like staffing a team with the proper tools.
Yeah, and I think that is kind of a segue to our next benefit that Aircall is experiencing, is that operational efficiency. So really kind of the happier your team, one of those additional effects is just a more efficient team overall. So maybe can you walk us through how Front has actually improved that operational efficiency for Aircall?
Yeah, so I think first of all, the whole idea of like basically collaborating on email, pulling in other people, managers, colleagues into emails. I think that's just more, like, I think the end result is just CSMs that feel more empowered, because you basically know you can get help on a really difficult question that a customer asks. You can get the expertise right there basically in the room, in the environment with you while you're drafting that email. So I think that's just really empowering feeling. I mean, of course, there's other ways to do this. You could always take to another channel. You could Slack somebody, instant message somebody, call somebody to get that information. But just the fact that like we don't actually have to leave that environment to get the information, and that we're all in that same space, I think it makes a difference, especially in the current times when everyone is pretty much remote. To have the feeling that the team is working collaboratively on these emails, I think that is really empowering. It also allows us to, for example, coach people through the onboarding. Like right now, we still bring in people into the team. They onboard remotely. If they have insecurities, fears of like providing the wrong answer, they can always like just reach out. It's just one click away, like one comment away in front. So I think that really makes a difference. I think also like the fact that we work with so many tools in order to supply our customers with the right level of information, prepare our emails, prepare our presentation. There's just so many tools. I think I haven't counted them, but there must be like 10, 15 tools, I think, that we use on a regular that like are fairly heavy in terms of how they're employed in my team. And so I just think that context switching is another thing that's just kind of like an sometimes even overlooked mental burden, where you just have to, go over into your Excel spreadsheet and copy a number from there, go over the CRM system and get some information from there, put that in the email, maybe get other information that lives in another part of the tool that's tracking, for example, adoption. So it's always like the creation of the email, the creation of meaningful content for the clients actually takes a lot of time and also mental energy. So I think at the end of that, of a long week or day, like people are just, oftentimes like also tired, because it's just like really, it's just a lot of work. And so if we can decrease that mental burden and just give them the information they need, like basically a customer asks a question, that information is right there next to the email, that's just such an improvement. I mean, we probably don't do everything right yet. Like we're still like fairly early on in the journey, but I really think that's kind of the vision that we have, that when we stop and when we're completely happy with the implementation, that should be the case, that people don't have to leave, or if they have to leave, to go outside to get more details, because you can't cram everything next to the email. Of course, it's real estate, but if they have to get additional information, there should at least be really clearly like quick links to the corresponding entry, for example, in the CRM system. Or like just a button to click to actually open more details in our business intelligence solution to display customer metrics and so on. So in the end, it almost should feel like as of one piece, as if this was like all designed for custom built for our purposes. That's at least the idea.
Oh, wonderful. And would love to, before we kind of hop over to questions, to hear about our last benefit that Aircall is seeing is just increased growth. And it sounds like we're increasing growth, not only kind of internal, some of these metrics we're looking at, but then also that revenue growth as well. Can you walk us through how Front is helping the team there?
Yeah, I think that comes back to like the fact that I pointed out at the beginning, that at least on our side, like I was flying blind in terms of like what's our current email volume, what's the topics that customers ask us about, which is always an interesting question. So like if we spend so much time on emails, first of all, is it inbound or outbound? And if it's a lot of inbound, what are customers asking about? So this whole like topic of like analyzing exactly what's happening on email as a customer channel, for me is like, it represents a big growth opportunity as well. So to first of all, just quantify like what is the correct ratio of a CSM to customers, especially in the small business segment. It's, if you measure, for example, like what's the average response time, and you then look across the team and you kind of like put that side by side of how many customers somebody manages, you get a really good idea, a good grasp of like status quo of like what is a proper account load that allows somebody to respond in time, in a time frame that we basically establish as that's acceptable, and at what point do they get over that limit. So like already kind of like establish the benchmark of like how many accounts you can give to somebody any given time. Then in terms of optimization opportunities, if you start looking at all of these individual inbox and the pooled inboxes, and then you start kind of segmenting and say, okay, like how many conversations are we having about, for example, invoices, about contracts, about particular problems, for example, you quickly understand, okay, maybe there's actually something we can do in the proactive communication. So maybe like we can actually get ahead of these questions. And for example, in the automated email sequences we send as part of the onboarding, maybe we can address those questions and reduce that volume, and then actually measure if it gets less. And then finally, also just differentiating our service offering, right? So I think that it's a much more adequate experience for customers that maybe just like buy us for like 3, 4, 5 users and just want to use the phone. Like they don't need a completely dedicated CSM that kind of like works with them strategically and with a consultative approach. They just want sometimes very simple answers very quickly. And by deploying a pooled model, that just also like allows us not only to increase the ratio of CSMs to customers, but also just to actually, while doing that and while having cost efficiency gains and productivity gains, also increasing the experience for the customer. Mm-hmm. One other thing, like I forgot to mention this, like the last point, I think I mentioned that I think before a little bit in terms of onboarding. That's also been like an outcome that I didn't really think about. But like one thing that like we are now able to do, especially now that we onboard people remotely, is we can actually pretty say with a big amount of certainty at what point they're ready and fully ramped up, just by looking at kind of their email behavior, right? Because you can see when people start new in the team, they take a lot of time to like compile their emails. They're very kind of want to make sure it's right. double check the information. And as they get more comfortable with the product and the answers, like they just like, you can see like the response times go up. It's not so much that I actually like look at the response times as like a main metric, because in the end, like it's about the quality of the response, and we're not a support team where we have to like basically like fight for every minute that we can be faster. But in the end, it's still like a nice indicator to see like how comfortable are people, and if somebody's kind of stuck at like a very high response time, it at least gives you an idea of like they're not fully ramped up yet, and maybe like we can follow up and see what's keeping them from performing at a better rate. And so that to quantify kind of like when somebody's ramped up, that's also a hidden benefit, especially in a remote environment where you might not always get that instant feedback, or maybe even get the wrong information that somebody actually says like, yeah, I'm ready to go, but like the response times are still like way high. So you want to be careful to like increase the account load that you give them. So that's also quite a nice outcome of the whole thing.
Well, Kai, thank you so much for explaining your journey of some of the problems that you saw with customer success and really driving that retention at Aircall, how you found Front, and then the benefits that it has been giving your team. I would actually love to turn it over to our audience now to see if anyone has any questions that they want to ask you, kind of pick your brain on. So for those of you who are in the audience, you'll actually see a little question section inside this webinar platform. Feel free to just put them there and let us know your questions. You will also see that we've created a poll. Would love to learn a little bit more, whether you are an existing Front customer or even Aircall customer, or you are kind of brand new, you're curious to learn about both. And would love to see some questions come in. While we are waiting for some of these questions, Kai, a question that I have for you is what's next with Front? Where do you want to go next?
So I think there's so much to do, which is a good thing. It's exciting. Like I think like on the Salesforce side, I think we've only scratched the surface, right? So like the first step was getting the information next to the emails. The second step is actually like getting deeper into the customer information and then tying that to the rules engine in Front. There's been some really exciting feature updates on your site where I think we can soon start routing emails based on different just information we pick from Salesforce. Like the easiest one being contract value, but there's many other factors that we want to take into account when it comes to routing emails with priority and so on. So I think that for us will be like one of the priorities. I think also like there's a lot of possibilities on the custom integration side. I mean, we of course started with the out-of-the-box integrations, but in the end, one other thing that I'm interested in is like getting as much information from our different system into Front. So there's also like I think a lot we can do with the API with webhooks that we can build.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect segue. I see a question here from Eric. Do you actually use opportunity / pipeline with your CRM, Salesforce in this case? And if so, how easy or heavy is that lift?
Yes, we do. So the way that we are able now to create opportunities from within Front, that's also just like another efficiency gain. I mean, in the end, like we still probably will want to go into our CRM system Salesforce and then like manage pipeline opportunities in there, because it's just built for that, and kind of to the idea that I think like every system should be used according to its strengths, and Salesforce is really great at managing pipeline, creating opportunities and filling in the information there. But that being said, there are instances where, for example, like you talk to a customer about an opportunity on email, they give you an update, and then basically that forces you to update maybe the deal stage, maybe the deal value. And so all of that can be done on Front without, again, switching context. So I guess the explicit answer, like I would be careful to like have everything being done in Front, because again, like it's, like there are things that need to happen in a CRM system. But if it's just like administrative adjustments, for example, on existing opportunities, absolutely.
Yeah, I see another question here from William, probably best suited for me. Is Front best suited for B2B or B2C? I think, Kai, you're primarily working with it in the B2B space mostly. But to answer your question, we actually work with all businesses across the board. So both B2B as well as B2C teams. So if you are interested in learning more, always feel free to reach out to us. I know that we are at time, and Kai, that you have a hard stop. So for those of you who we weren't able to ask your question, maybe you were writing it down or it's going to pop in your brain in a few minutes. I will leave my email here, so you can always make sure to email them my way, and we'll make sure to loop in Kai as well. But it's just Matthew@fronttap.com. Feel free to send any feedback that you have for Kai, for the front team. We love, love, love to hear it. And Kai, thank you again so much for joining. We really appreciate it.
Of course, it was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.